Hi, everyone. Welcome to the School of Reinvention podcast. I am your host, Roger Osorio. I'm a reinvention coach and author of the book, The Journey to Reinvention, How to Build a Life Aligned with Your Values, Passions, and Purpose. I'm here with Azul Corajoria, who is an integrative health coach. She helps people improve their relationship with food, fitness, and their bodies by harnessing the power of self-love and self-compassion as a foundation for true well-being to change the way they approach exercise and nutrition as acts of self-care to cultivate empowerment and true confidence, all while improving their physical and mental health. Azul, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us. We had a really great prep call, and what I loved about, well, first of all, about you reaching out to me and us connecting was that you were willing to really go off your normal script. You do very different interviews usually, and I came along and I said, there's something else I want to talk about. And I love that you were so open to that. So thank you so much for that.
Of course.
Cool. So let's dive right in. So I want to talk about your journey to the point where you realized it was time to reinvent yourself. You know, our listeners are folks that may have already realized that, or they might be getting close to realizing that. And so I love getting those stories about how someone walks that journey and then that day comes where they realize something has to change. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I went to school for communication studies, and I got to communication studies because I thought I wanted to do psychology and work with one-on-one with people, and then realized like the trajectory of that was going to be a lot of money and a lot of time that I didn't feel like I had at that time. So I went a little broader, did communication studies, which was more research-based, so the science of how people communicate as opposed to like marketing and advertising and things like that. And coming out of college, I kind of took one of the first jobs that I could get, was at a kind of a startup, but had been in business for a couple years. So it was a little bit of a bigger startup, but I worked there as an executive assistant for a fantastic boss. The culture was really great. I loved it, but I didn't want to be an executive assistant for the rest of my life. So then within the company, I transitioned into marketing, and I liked it, but I didn't like it at the same time. And at that point, I'd also kind of been wondering if I wanted to live in LA, if I wanted to go elsewhere. An opportunity opened up for me to move to New York, and opportunity in the sense that like my friend was like, you should come stay on my couch. That was the opportunity. So I was like, right? I was like, I've always wanted to live in New York. I did my time here 2 years, loved the culture, loved the people I worked for, just knew I was just bored. It wasn't like aligned with what I wanted, even though I didn't know what I wanted at that time. It just didn't feel right. And so I packed up my bags, moved to New York. She let me stay on her couch for, I think, 3 months while I was like temping. At that point, I thought I wanted to do event planning. I was just like trying to figure it out. So I did some temp jobs, and then it came to a point where I was like, okay, I need to maybe start actually making money to be able to live in New York. So that's when I was offered a job from my temp position to be, again, an executive assistant for like this consulting company. And I got paired up with this amazing boss. He was awesome, and had fun there in the sense that I, again, liked the culture. I was getting very lucky with liking who I was working for. But
2 for 2 at this point.
2 for 2, super lucky. I feel like that doesn't happen. So it was kind of one of those things where like I never liked what I was doing. I just liked who I worked with, right? I like who I worked for. And this job was interesting because it was very easy, and it was a very typical like clock in, clock out, 8 to 5, or 8 to 6, whatever that might have been. And I was getting really bored. It was I was having kind of fun at the job, but kind of one of those things where I felt like I was withering away is kind of the way I can describe it. I was like, there is something, I need to be doing something more, and this is not fulfilling to me. And I was getting to like not a good place mentally. I think what helped was that it was allowing me to live this New York life, which was amazing, but it wasn't like necessarily, so it balanced each other out until it kind of didn't. And then I was like, I just actually don't feel good sitting here and doing nothing. And I would talk to family and friends, and they would be like, you should feel so lucky. Like, you're clocking in, clocking out. You're making good money. Work doesn't have to be life, right? Like, you don't have to get your purpose from work. Just do the hours and leave, or like go back to school, or while you're there, you know? And I was kind of looking around me, and it was like all these like older women in these jobs that have been doing it for years and years and years. And that's what they wanted. They wanted the package with the health insurance, and to know that they were ending at 5, and then just to go to work and like chill at work. And that was what they wanted. And I remember almost being envious. I was like, oh, like I wish I could just sit here and be happy and like clock out at 5 and then go live my life, you know? It just seems so simple and great and just amazing, but it wasn't sitting well with me. And so with that time, that's when I got my health coaching certificate. So I'm sure we'll go into it later, but I kind of went through my own journey with food and fitness and got a little complicated. And so I really started looking into, well, I love talking about food. I love talking about working out. Those are 2 like very big hobbies of mine. And those are on my off time. Those are the articles that I find myself reading, the books I end up renting, the documentaries. Like, I just realized there was something there that I really liked. And I had heard about, I wasn't going to go back to school and do nutrition, like registered dietitian, all that kind of stuff. I, again, in my mind was like, I can't afford that. So I looked into health coaching, researched all these different programs, and eventually ended up deciding on this one. And it was a year-long program. And I was like, well, I have the time. I'm at this job where I can do them both. And so, yeah, so I did that while I was there. It kind of helped me sit with that job a little better, because I could be like, okay, well, I'm doing this to ultimately get me somewhere else, hopefully, right? And so I completed my health coaching certificate then, and had never worked one-on-one with clients. So I was like kind of too afraid to dip my toe in, you know? So I did it, learned a lot for personal reasons, for my own personal growth and to help me, but kind of like left it to the side for a little bit. And when that happened, I was like, okay, I really don't like this job. And then my boss at the time was telling me he was going to leave. And I was like, I'm only here because I like working with you. So I'm going to do something different. And I knew I didn't want it to be a corporate job because I had the startup history. And I was like, I like that environment more. I felt more utilized. I felt more wanted there. I felt more, my voice was heard a little bit more. So another opportunity opened up for me for a startup, as in one guy hiring like the first person he was going to hire. And it was in the food space. It was in the food distribution space. So I was like, oh, that could be an interesting transition into the industry I want to be a little bit more a part of. And it was a startup. So I thought it was going to be fun. But anyone that knows a startup is a lot. So I transitioned in and like right away was like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. I still lived in New York at the time, and it was a very fun experience. I was getting what I wanted in terms of like, I felt valued and appreciated, and my voice was heard, and all of the things I liked about a smaller company. But it was a lot. I was wearing a lot of hats, which was very exciting. It was way more exciting than the job I had before. But there was still something. There were certain things that would happen at the company that didn't feel. The best way I can explain it is like it didn't feel aligned with who I was or how I would approach certain things. Certain ways they wanted to sell the product and push the product, and the way someone at my company at one point was like talking to vendors and talking to people just didn't I constantly found myself being like, oh, that's not how I want to be perceived. Like, I am a part of this company and it's small. And so if this is the approach that we're taking, it kind of, it makes it seem like I am okay with that in a way.
Yeah, it reflects on you.
It reflects on me. Yeah. And I didn't, you know, like I felt like I was constantly trying to like blow out fires, and it was just, there was like kind of like a clash towards the end. And I had some personal stuff going on at home, LA, and it kind of got to a point where I was just like, this doesn't feel, I feel really bad. This feels really, really bad. And at that point, I had like really been leaning into the health coaching. I had done, somehow had found time to kind of, I didn't take on any clients necessarily, but I was reaching out on Facebook and offering free calls and like free little sessions to friends and to not necessarily family, because that can get complicated, but like to people I knew on Facebook. And, you know, if anything's for free, people will take it. So like people were doing free consultation calls with me, and I was talking about it more and starting to get a little more comfortable doing that, and also realizing, oh, I want to do this more. Like this is kind of this is where I want to be going, I think. And so it got to a point where I just couldn't take it anymore at the startup. I had to come back to LA for some personal reasons, and it just aligned to where I was like, okay, I'm going to leave that. And I think I'm done with like corporate, or not necessarily corporate, because when I came back, I ended up working at Equinox, but like I'm done kind of listening to someone else. Like I think I want to try my own thing, even though I never resonated with, like I was always like, I can't be an entrepreneur. Like I have to have someone tell me what to do, or else I'll never do anything and I'll sit down all day and be like, no. Like I just did it. The perception of myself wasn't like, I'm not someone that can organize my own day or like be motivated to do things on my own if there's not like a deadline and a project. And so in my head, I still
in structure, like
exactly.
You'll fit in well and you'll rock. You'll be awesome there.
Yeah.
Without the system, you were concerned. Gosh, like,
exactly.
What would I do without the structure, without the systems in place?
100%. So I never like really thought like I'm gonna own my own business one day, you know. And so I'm at this company. I want to leave. I don't want to go back into doing another corporate job, but I was still too scared to do health coaching. It still was kind of not very well known, right? And so I was kind of looking in the space, and I was like, well, what is close to health coaching where like I can start to dip my toe, start to get kind of like experience with maybe not health coaching, but let's say working one-on-one with clients. And the really obvious one was personal training, right? You're working one-on-one with clients. It's in the health-related field. You're helping people, you know, like work out and move their bodies. And it was aligned with health coaching. So I was like, okay, I think I'm gonna go into personal training. It's the one-on-one. I got certified. I was like, if I'm gonna work anywhere, it's gonna be, I want to work at a good gym. And I also knew I love to learn. I'm like a forever student. So I looked for opportunities where I thought I would learn a lot. And Equinox at the time was one of the only gyms that had like a full learning. They had their own learning system. So you go in as a trainer and they put you through their own kind of academy, you can call it. And so I was like, that's the one. That's what I'm going to do. So
lots of structure
still. Yeah. I was just too scared to dive right in on my own. Yeah. And so I left New York, moved back to LA, moved back in with my mom for a little bit, because when you're starting personal training, you don't make anything. But I had a savings at that point. I have always been really good at saving. So I had a savings, and I was lucky enough to move back in with my mom at the time. And so I started working at Equinox and was just like hustling. It's like, it's no joke working for a gym like that. The hours were really rough, but I was learning so much, and I was getting that experience that I knew I needed to eventually feel comfortable enough to start doing it on my own. And I was able to weave in conversations, right? Like it was the same industry, same type of deal. So I was able to weave in conversations about lifestyle, stress management, nutrition, sleep, mindset, all of those things into my personal training sessions, right? Because you talk a lot as a personal trainer, you talk a lot about...
Yeah, you were in the right environment for those kinds of conversations. It's not like you were at a supermarket where, I mean,
Exactly.
well, I guess there eating could come up, but
Yeah,
you know, it's not, you were in a place that was relevant where that conversation is so close to what you're doing anyway. So naturally it's connected, they're related.
Yep.
And I love that distinction. I love how you picked up on that so quickly, because while it was not the ideal job, right? The ideal job would have been you coaching, doing your health coaching one-on-one with the clients that you're finding. You found a way to turn this into, well, there's a way for me to still practice my skills.
Yeah.
It's not the ideal way, but it still counts as practice.
Yeah, it still counts. And I just knew me, and I knew that diving right into doing my own thing was just, I was going to feel more anxious. There's going to be more anxiety and more stress than doing it this way. I think for some people, they can just kind of, screw it and dive in and like I didn't have that kind of trust in myself quite yet. And so I knew I needed to find kind of this like back road almost to get more comfortable. And so it ended up being that I could find an industry that I was aligned with. And what ended up happening then is because of my personal background with food and nutrition and everything that I had worked on and my complicated relationship with those, I found my approach was different than the typical, how do I say this without like sounding, the typical trainer fitness industry standard, let's say. There's a very certain way that you're told to sell personal training, kind of across the board. It's just kind of an industry standard, right? And it's a lot of fear tactics, kind of a lot of fear mongering, getting people on a scale, finding the one thing or the couple of things that you can kind of be like, oh, this is all great, but this, or this is all terrible, you should work on. It wasn't how I wanted to do it, and it wasn't how I wanted to introduce new people into this space that I ended up, I love, that I didn't love in the beginning, but then I ended up loving because I made it my own. And so there was a little bit of headbutting there because, again, we're told to do it a very certain way. It's scripted in a very certain way, and I didn't want to do that. So my progression was a little bit slower, but it felt right to me. And what ended up happening was that I ended up retaining clients for way longer because I was doing it my way. It was very authentic. It was very genuine, and the right people clicked with that. And so I ended up having great relationships with all of my clients because it was, again, authentic, genuine, also different, right? It was like a different kind of approach. And the people that needed it got it. And when they got it, it was like life-changing, right? And that felt really good to me versus what I was being told to do. So I kind of made my own way in there. But being around it was all very triggering to me too, because it wasn't aligned. Again, it was weird. It was like the right space, the right fit, but like not aligned in terms of values, I guess, and morals, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're one person in that entire culture who does it differently. And kind of going back to, the issue you had at another place where this reflects on you too. When you tell people you work at Equinox, they're not thinking of your special, unique way because they haven't met you yet in that way.
Right.
They're thinking of the way, maybe their experience. And they're like, you that's what you do. You're one of those folks. And that's fine, right? But that wasn't fine with you. Because at the end of the day, you're like, it's not quite who I am.
Doesn't feel good. Yeah. And it doesn't feel good. And then you can tell when someone's not living in their truth, right? It just feels very forced. You might not do so well because there's a disconnect and people can just tell. And so then COVID happened. We all went online, and And there were certain people, there's again some headbutting in terms of like how they wanted to approach the online world versus the way we wanted to approach the online world. And I started, because now it was open and I wasn't confined to one gym, I started getting referrals from like my clients to other people. And so I slowly start to build my practice online while everything was shut down, because now, especially being online, you didn't have to be in a certain city, in a certain neighborhood, at the certain gym, at the whatever, to work with me. So I started, you know, and then it's COVID, so everyone's working out inside. And so it worked out really well. And at that point, I had been weaving health coaching into my sessions. My clients were getting a lot from it. It was feeling really good. And I started to build that trust muscle in a way. I was like, okay, like I can do this. People like it. I'm starting to understand my message. So then I started to also open up my health coaching practice a little bit more and sell it as like apart from training, which was really cool. And so then I was still mostly training, but I was like slowly starting to build that clientele list. And that's when it started to feel really good. And then by the time things opened up, I had built my business online and didn't really need to go back. And so I basically told them I wasn't going to go back. And that's when I started online. And that's, you know, slowly again, like I started to, this was like health coaching clients here, training clients here. And I'm slowly been starting to kind of, you know, balance it out a little bit more. And, you know, ideally, like it balances out. And then I end up being, which is funny because I originally wanted to go to school for psychology, and is kind of what I'm doing now. I'm working one-on-one with people. I'm helping people, you know, heal their relationship with food, fitness, and their bodies. And like, it is a lot of psychology, coaching, mindset, all that. So it's just funny to think like, oh, that's so weird. I found a way to do what I wanted, just in a completely different
way back when you wanted. You still found your way there, just you took a different path.
Exactly. So a lot of reinvention there, and it's still, you know, it's still going on. I feel like anybody that owns their own business kind of knows, right? Like on social media is always you're always having to like reinvent the wheel on social media and your offers. Like I have a group coaching program now as opposed to just one-on-one. I do workshops. So like, you know, you kind of figure out you change it up every once in a while. That's the kind of cool thing. And then it's also cool to kind of be like, oh, I didn't think I could do this, but I strengthened that trust muscle enough through kind of my journey to where now I'm like, of course, I'm organized enough. I'm motivated enough. I'm all of these things to be an entrepreneur, even though I never thought I could be one, right? I'm capable. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that doubt, like you slowly strengthen the trust and the doubt goes down. But like the doubt still comes up all the time, mind you. Like that's
of course. I mean, because you're growing and there's new challenges that you're like, oh gosh, that's new to me. You know, even though you are on this journey, that's a new part of the journey. But I think it's really great. And this is the part that I really want to lift up. And we're going to go back to a few things that I took notes on that I really want to double click on. But this idea, you know, you were very aware, very self-aware of how you felt about health coaching. You had the certification, you had the training under your belt already, but you didn't feel ready to do it. And, you know, in your story, you share but you found another way. You found a way to ease into it. And I think that is so important because, you know, it's one of the fears when we're doing, you know, when we're reinventing ourselves is maybe to put that skill to practice, you know, or sooner rather than later. And to your point, some people feel like I can just dive right in and I'll just give it a shot and whatever happens, happens. But not everyone feels that way. And I really appreciate how you approached that. And you took the time that it took and you went through those, you know, experiences. And the moment it felt right, you knew like, okay. And then I just love that, like, you know, all of a sudden it's like health coaching clients way down here and you had all these other fitness clients, and that slowly started to switch, and you started to flip that now, to the point where you had all health coaching clients, and you're no longer in the fitness space in that same way, I guess. But so yeah, I think that's an important thing to lift up, because first time entrepreneurs, and I myself included, on my journey to reinvention, there were times where I just thought, I'm not ready to do this. I don't feel ready. And it's such a common feeling when people are getting into entrepreneurship. But you didn't just back down, and that's the key. You didn't back down. You found another way. You acknowledged that this is how you felt. You gave yourself the, hey, this is how I feel. You accepted that, but you didn't say, well, can't do that ever in my life because of this is how I feel today. You just said, not right now, but I'm going to get there, and I'm going to find another way. And you kept your eyes open, and you did. And the moment you got into Equinox, you saw that, wait a minute, these people could use a little bit of this. Yeah. I could sprinkle a little of this in my work here, and we'll weave it in there and test it out a little bit. So really cool. But there's a lot of other things I wanted to jump back into that were really important. One was that when you were in that job and you realized where, again, like you were 2 for 2, you had great people you worked for, but you knew that you didn't want to stay there, like as an executive assistant in that second job, when you were in New York, that temp job that turned into a full-time. And that I feel like you said a couple of things. You said one, that you felt like you were starting to wither away. That's such an important thing for people to think about, because you mentioned there was a moment where you knew this was not right for you. This is not what you're not growing. Perhaps you're not feeling challenged. You're not really like operating on all cylinders. You're kind of just, you're like in first or second gear, and that's like enough. And you're like, oh, I really want to like let this car rip, and I want to go all the way to like 5th or 6th gear or something crazy. So then, but then you offset it. And this is so important. What you did here, I think, is that you saw, well, but it does allow me to be here in New York. It does allow me to enjoy a certain life that does matter to me, And so for a little while, that got you through that. And then, but then you were very aware that, okay, it's no longer doing that anymore. The things I'm getting out of this, the good parts, are no longer outweighing the bad parts. Now I got to do something. And then I love what you did, that you mentioned, well, the nature of the job allowed you to have a lot of time. So some people might have thought, I need to quit this thing. This is not right for me. I'm out of here. And perhaps in the Great Resignation, many people did that, exactly that. Yeah. But you were like, well, I'm not that busy, so what could I do with that time? And you went and got that health certification. Was that the health? Yeah, that was out, because you did the physical training later, or the personal training later. So you went and got that, and you made the most of that time. And so what I call that is like, you took a situation that was less than ideal or not ideal at all, and you made it great, And that's such an important idea when I interview people who are on the journey to reinvention. They take that moment, they take their circumstances, they take, as the saying goes, the cards that were dealt to them, and they find a way to make them work. And I think that's so important on a journey like the journey to reinvention, because as you know, as you experienced, you probably, if we had asked you back then, hey, can you map out what your journey might look like over the next 10 years? You probably could have never mapped what has happened.
Yeah. Hindsight is 20/20, but you can't do that forward.
But like there's no way, but especially a journey like yours, because it took twists and turns that you never counted on, right? You didn't know if you were going to go back to LA or not. You didn't even know if you were going to go to New York or not, right? But a couch appeared, and you're like, well, I've got a couch. Yeah. So that makes it so that I can go. So those are things you just cannot predict, right? And that's I think that's the thing about the journey to reinvention, that one is so beautiful, but also can be so scary. It's like a double-edged sword. And the way you navigated that in terms of saying, okay, this is a less than ideal situation, but what can I do to make it a little more ideal? Maybe for a little while, perhaps not forever. And you said, well, let me get that training, and let me get that out of the way now while I have this extra time, and I have the security of a paycheck, so I can live here comfortably. I can still do my thing, but I can start moving in a new direction. And so, we're going to kind of go into this a little bit more, but this was like your way of launching a reinvention project. You're like, let me launch an experiment. Let me start testing something. And that was your education in, health coaching was that experiment. So that is so key. And so I'm just kind of lifting up these parts of your story that I want the listeners to really pay attention to, because wherever they are in their journey, there's a version of this story that's there that could be their version. I want them to like say, what could I be doing right now? Rather than quitting, like how can I turn my current job, which may not be so ideal, into a more ideal role, perhaps for an extra 6 months or an extra year, however long that ideal situation might happen. So that I thought was really interesting. You took a tough, less than ideal situation and you made it great. The other thing that, you mentioned was that family said, hey, you're lucky to have this job. Come on. Like, you've got it good. You've got a great job. You live in New York. Like, seriously, do you not get that people dream about this and wish for this all their lives and never get it? And here you are and you have it. This is so important, because I feel like this is something that happens a lot, where if you have a really great situation from the outside looking in, everyone kind of like, are you crazy? And then, sometimes we could buy into that and say, maybe I am crazy. Maybe I shouldn't be crazy. Maybe I should get my stuff together and stay where I'm at because things are good. I heard this too on the journey, and a lot of people I've interviewed have heard versions of this. But you still knew that this was not for you. I think that's like that stood out in your story as you were kind of walking us through that. But anyway, so I just wanted to lift these pieces up because I think these are really, really important. I'm trying to see, but ultimately, I think what for me is so beautiful about the story is that you took your time. You took the time that you needed, and there was no like, I have to do this by tomorrow. I have to do this, and that's the thing about reinvention. It's so uncertain, and so you really have to navigate it the way it goes. But you were active. You were not just some passive person on this journey. You were the driver for sure.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, you pulled out all the great learning points for sure. And I think, it was, I didn't know exactly what I had to do or what I was going to do. I just knew that I had a bigger purpose, I just knew. And also I think every job that I was at, I would look at the trajectory of, well, what does success look like here? What is that? If I'm here for 5 years, if I keep doing this, I'm going to be vice president of marketing or whatever. And I just always remember being like, I don't really like that. I mean, the security part of me was like, oh, well, that would be great because I'm going to be the boss and the alpha, the societal, I get to say I'm a CMO one day, and I get to drive the car, and I get to be in the outfit, and I get the notoriety that comes with it. But deep down, the actual job or the actual responsibilities or the actual lifestyle, I just didn't resonate with me, And so I think that helped a lot too. Each job I was at, I would look at, where am I going next? And I'd be like, that doesn't look very great. That's not, what does that fulfill my purpose? Or is it just my ego and pride that wants to get there? Because if it's just ego and pride and I get there, but it doesn't fulfill my purpose or doesn't feel good to me, then I'm not going to be happy once I get there. And I think I was able to differentiate that, which was really helpful. That and just knowing that I wanted to work with people and I wanted to help. And yeah.
That's a powerful question. I mean, that's really, really powerful that you asked yourself this question and sought to make that distinction. Is this my ego driving this decision, or is this who I really am and what I really want? And and I love how you're treating this, because you're not saying that, corporate is bad, or these types of roles are bad. You're just this is just not what I wanted. And I checked in with myself and realized and discovered that this is not what I want. What was that check-in process like? Because obviously you had this key question, but how does that unfold? Because I feel like listeners might be wondering and going through some of this, but it's not easy to do that inner work.
Yeah.
To check in with yourself, truly check in with yourself and ask yourself the tough questions.
Yeah.
What do you recall from that
time? That's a great question, because I've always Because of how I grew up, I had to grow up fairly quickly, so I feel like I just became very self-aware, self-reflective, I guess. I think also because I want to do health coaching, with the health coaching certificate, a lot of it is knowing what questions to ask, how to dive deep. I was always very interested in that kind of stuff. I loved psychology. So I think there was an air there of just having already, I think self-reflection and self-awareness is just one of the most powerful, I don't even know if I'd call it skills, but maybe skills to have, skills to try and utilize, right? That's why therapy works so great. So, so if you can't do it for yourself, a therapist will for sure do it for you, right? But so I think that's kind of it's hard to like tell people how to do that. I think perhaps, if there's one thing that I can maybe say is that, right, like one thing I teach my clients is that like all feelings are neutral. Every emotion is neutral because you can learn from every emotion. So I think we like to dwell on emotions like fear or anger or just not feeling good. We want to escape those a lot of the times, and we just don't want to feel them, right? But I think if you can lean into those and ask yourself why, instead of trying to not be angry or not be upset or not be in fear, you can utilize those feelings, right? To be like, okay, well, just like happiness kind of tells us what to do more of, those feelings can kind of tell you what to do less of, right? And so I think kind of maybe trying to utilize those. So if you're not feeling good in a job, or if you're not feeling aligned, or if you're not feeling, any which way, instead of trying to make yourself happy, instead maybe lean into it and get really curious and be like, well, why? Like, why don't I feel good? Why doesn't that make me feel good? Why do I feel that way? What, like, why am I depressed? Why am I anxious? Why am I, asking those questions can hopefully help you start to do that self-reflection part, right? That's probably like the easiest way I could like teach someone how to do that a little bit. Is just leaning into those because they're just going to tell you like what maybe you don't like. And that could be really scary, right? Because I think a lot of times like people come to me for food issues, right? Or body image issues. And so much of the time it ends up being not related to what you're eating or how much you're working out. Those are just the things that we can control and the things that we think can give us more self-worth and self-confidence. But when we actually take like a bigger picture look out, they're in an unfulfilling career. They freaking hate their jobs. They don't like their boss, or, other things like they're not in the right relationship, or their, parents are really, whatever it might be, right? So I see it happen a lot where people are stuck in situations that they don't enjoy because they're scared of, like asking the question of, well, if not this, then what? I don't know. But if you never ask yourself that question, you will never know, and you'll continue to do things that you don't like. And if you don't do things that you like, then that affects every area of life. You just become cold and bitter, and you only have the one life, and you're at work for more hours a day than you see your family. So
no, and I like what you said about curiosity, and I feel like that's a key that's a key word right in there, in terms of take a curious approach about yourself. Rather than just sitting there and accepting things as they are, ask, why am I feeling this way? How did I get to this feeling? Did something happen? What did happen? And explore those things. And to your point, it doesn't happen overnight, but that begins a process. That inquisitive kind of approach, that curious approach, begins a process of getting to the point where you can do that inner work. But it won't happen overnight. You just got to ask yourself these questions a lot, pick up on patterns, all of that. And I think that's really, really key. I want to also ask you a little bit about when you decided to take that health certification. When I talk about reinvention, when I talk about reinvention projects and beginning that experiment, I always talk about like, what was that first act? What was that first thing that someone does that signals to themselves and to the world that, you know what, I'm exploring a curiosity. I'm exploring something that I think could be a new path. I don't know at this point, just like you probably didn't know at that point where this could go, but you took an action, you know. How did you arrive at that decision to take that action? How did you get to that point where, you know, you're like, you know what, I'm going to do this program, you know, health, I'm going to approach this, and or a combination of, and then take that action? Because I don't want to take that for granted that you took that action. That's a big action. You could have just continued doing the job, right? And just whatever, and just continue living that way, but you didn't. You took action. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think you get to a certain point, and I think there's like a spectrum, right? But you start to just get fed up with how you're feeling, right? And ideally, you don't get to a point where it gets really bad, right? But like, again, you kind of lean into those emotions of like, oh, I'm not feeling so great, you know, like why? It's the same reasons why a lot of people hire a personal trainer or, you know, start a diet, is because they're just so fed up with feeling a certain way, right? Yeah. And so I think I was noticing how unhappy I was getting and noticing how not great I was treating people around me, and just kind of like looking at, am I going to feel this way for the next year, 3 years, 5 years? Like, this is not going anywhere good. You know, like I was just like, I'm always kind of forward thinking. I have like anxiety, so my mind is just always rushing to like conclusions. And so like I was just like thinking about my trajectory and being like, this is going to get worse, like before it gets better. And I had gotten to health coaching because I was going through my own, kind of like I had mentioned before, I was going through my own thing with nutrition and fitness, and kind of noticed like some unhealthy patterns in myself. So there was the personal reason for going into health coaching, which was very like for me, right? And then there was like the external, where it was like, I feel like I want to work with people. I want to help people. And I don't know how, but again, I was leaning into like, well, what do I like, right? Like, what are my hobbies? What do I enjoy doing? Some people like to read books on Bitcoin, and I like to read books on like working out and anatomy and like food and how it affects your body and things like that. So I just kind of leaned into my interests, really, and kind of sort of started looking at, I remember being in college, and when they're like, oh, what do you want to do? One of the recommendations they gave us was to talk to people in positions that we thought we might want. So like reach out to family and friends or LinkedIn or professors or whatever who are in a similar career that you want, to ask them like, what are your responsibilities? What do you do on a day-to-day? Do you like your job? Do you, things like that. And so I kind of did something similar with health coaching, where I was like following people on Instagram. I knew a friend of a friend that had taken the course that I was like kind of interested in. I was Googling a lot, figuring out like, what does a day in the life look like? What is, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I did, like I said, kind of like a lot of research into different programs, and then got on some calls with the program itself, reached out to some people on Instagram that I knew had done the program, saw like career trajectories. Like some people went on to write books. Some people went on to be one-on-one health coaches. Some people, and it all looked fun to me. I was like, that could be cool. That could be cool. That could be, So I was able to like finally kind of see like, oh, if this is where I end up, that would be pretty sick. Like that would be really cool. So that's kind of like what got me like more interested in it. And I think, again, I had the cushion of being at a job. So it was a hefty sum of money, but I had a savings and I wasn't on my own yet. I was still working for the job. So I was like, I'll make this up in, a couple months sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And so I think that was very, very helpful. But I think mostly it was looking at recognizing the way I was feeling, and then looking like a year or two in advance and being like, this is going to get worse before it gets better. And I don't want it to get worse. And I'm also like, getting older, and I would like to kind of figure out what I want to do. And, like, you can do this at any age, right? But I think I was in that mindset of like, I don't want to be this, like, I recognize I was in New York, my dream city, and I was still unhappy. And I was just like, this sucks. I don't want to, I can't conform in that way, right? And again, there were people that really loved that job. And again, I was kind of envious of that. Yeah. But it just wasn't, I was never going to be able to get there. So, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And I thought that was really interesting what you said earlier. And you just kind of restated that about you were almost envious of people who were just okay with this role that you were not okay with. You're like, oh, yeah, objectively, like, yeah, this could be so nice, right? Like I check in, I check out, I get to fully just enjoy the city after this. I have I have stable pay.
I know exactly.
And I just get on board with it.
Health insurance. Yeah, like,
shoot, that's so nice. Yeah, right? Why can't I get on board with this? Like, who am I? Like, why do I want to make things harder?
Exactly.
Like, why do I want to do that when it's like kind of easy right now? But I love what you said. You really leaned into your curiosity. Mm-hmm. And again, checking in with yourself, and really doing that inner work. And it sounds like what I just heard, and this is why I thought your answer was great, because what came through very clearly was it was a balance of curiosity and asking yourself the questions and doing all of that, and taking that action to Google topics, follow people, all those things. I mean, that's it. That's curiosity at work, right? And curiosity is this is a big idea that I'm exploring for my second book that's focused on reinvention as well, like kind of the art and science. This is the science, right? How curiosity just is so key to reinvention. Mm-hmm. And your story is just the perfect example of how, and we'll probably use the story in the book, by the way. So I might even interview you again for the book. But this story really demonstrates how curiosity is practiced in this context and how it led you to the point where you're like, you know what? This is it. This is what I'm going to do. Plus, you did some inner work. Combined with those things, you were able to like take this action. And that's what I wanted out of this question. This is what I was looking for. So this is an amazing answer, because there are a lot of people out there who might even know the action. They already know what the action is, but they're hesitant to pull the trigger on that action. Mm-hmm. Or they don't know what the action is, and they're even hesitant to, like, they don't know where to start. Like, how do I begin doing this? And you just share that with us. It was very simple. You just followed your curiosity. There was no like one size fits all solution. There wasn't like some perfect strategy. You Googled some stuff, you followed some people, you asked some questions, you reached out to some folks who knew more than you about this, and you put all that together and you checked in with yourself and you realized, yeah, like it may not be the ideal path, right? It might not be as easy as this path that I'm on right now, but it's the one that gets me excited. And to your point, this would be so cool. So let's pull on that thread. Let's take the certification. Let's see if it really is cool, as cool as it could be. And
I could hate it. Who knows?
Yeah, we're gonna find out. So I want to be mindful of the time. Let's dive into something real quick. One of the things that you shared with me on the prep call was how, talking about your business, as you were sharing with me a little bit more about your client work, was that you discovered a lot of your clients don't necessarily, they want something other than, to look great or the six pack or something like that. But they think that they want that. Like that's what they assume that's what they want, but they come to learn there's something greater that they want. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I think there's something here that also applies to the journey to reinvention.
Yeah. I mean, that's a whole nother episode that we can cover, but
I will do that one.
I will try and compact it. So it's this idea that, like, we had talked about the concept of you don't just buy a facial lotion to like hydrate your skin, right? Like, you are buying the idea that it's going to make your skin look really glossy and pretty, and then therefore you're going to have the confidence to go out into the world and sell it. So what you want isn't necessarily the lotion. What you want is like the confidence and the, like the ability to do certain things. And in fitness, it's very much the same thing. It's there's a societal idea that like, okay, well, if you weigh a certain amount, if you get into a certain size jean, if you whatever, then you'll be happy, you'll be confident, you'll get all the things that you want in life, all these things. So a lot of times when people come to me, it's very kind of for the very standard, like, I want to lose weight, right? You're like, okay, that's fine. Your body, we can do whatever you want. Why? Why do you want to lose weight? And it's like, I kind of call it the 5 whys, right? Like, you just keep digging. And it always ends up being where people just want to feel more confident. They want to feel more worthy of love. They want to feel more worthy of, X, Y, and Z. And so like the only way to do that is by being in a certain size body, right? And so a lot of it is, yes, eating well and balanced, working out, right? Going for walks outside, reducing your stress management, all these things are acts of self-care. I do believe that like everyone should do them, right? But in the industry that I'm in, it's a lot of like, we do these things as forms of punishment, right? Like, oh, I have to eat the salad because like I want to lose weight and, blah, blah. Oh, I have to like work out because, X, Y, and Z. And then it's like no wonder that people lose motivation and lose willpower really quickly, right? Because one, it's a long-term game. So you don't generally see results really quickly. And you're doing a bunch of stuff you don't like for a purpose that like isn't really even true to who you like, what you want, right? And so like one of the things I tell people all the time is like when people are like, oh, like how are you so motivated to work out every day? Like how do you do that, right? I'm like, well, I don't work out. One, I don't work out for like an aesthetic, like I have to be this way, right? Because like I know I am worthy. I am like, as I am fine, right? I think I do it for myself because I've built that sense of self-worth, that respect to be like, I want to live a long, healthy, happy life, and taking care of myself is going to do that, right? And then the other thing I say that I kind of like that sometimes helps people is like, look, I don't want to work out every day. Like I don't go to the gym because like I want to go to the gym. Some people do. Some people love it. That's like where they feel their best, like, right? Like it's common sense to them. Like it's not even a second thought, right? I'm not that way, right? I grew up athletic. I always liked like stuff like that, but like I don't feel like going to the gym every day and working out, yeah. Right? What I want is what I know the gym can give me, right? So whenever I'm thinking like, whenever I'm sitting on the couch, I'm like, oh, I don't really want to work out. I'm like, yeah, no, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss. No, like, of course I don't want to work out. Like, I want to feel stronger. I want to feel really proud of myself afterwards. I want the energy that I know the workout's going to give me. I want, right, like to be able to lift this when I'm 80 years old, right? That is what I want. And that is why I go to the gym, right? I don't want to always eat a salad, right? So, I won't always eat a salad because you don't need to just eat salads to be healthy, right? But like what I want is like the nutrients because I know they're good for me and I want to take care of myself, right? So like I'm not doing these things and so I think that's a really important part when it comes to fitness and nutrition and coming into it with that more nourishing, respectful approach is like, if you go into it with the idea of that, like you're punishing yourself and you're trying to like, I'm not worthy of, but I will be when I hit this or whatever, you're going to do a bunch of stuff you don't like, which, like let's say you do get to your goal, you're going to get to your goal and then be like, I don't have to do this anymore because I hate it. And then you're going to go back to, right? Like if you get promoted to CEO and all of a sudden you're like, great, I'm not going to do the responsibilities or like work as hard as I was to get here, you're going to quickly lose your job, right? And it's the same with taking care of yourself, like working out and fitness. So I hope that I get so passionate about this topic that I don't even know if I answered your question at this point, but that's kind of, yeah, like that's,
no,
that's
you
the
did.
theory.
And I think that this extends to so many other areas of life because I also think about it in terms of someone who decides they want to reinvent themselves into a first-time entrepreneur. what is it that you want? What's the equivalent of the six pack in that? Maybe it's to raise, $1 bazillion from venture capitalists. Maybe it's to, be a Forbes 30 under 30 or whatever, or 40 under 40 or whatever they do. And it's these things that are like the equivalent of the six pack. But then you have to, check in with yourself. Is that what you really want? And maybe it is. And if that is, then hey, then there you go. You've got clarity. But I would bet that more often than not, it's not that. I feel like when I talk to a lot of first-time entrepreneurs, especially those who are driven by some sort of desire to make some sort of positive social impact through their businesses, even if it is a business, it doesn't have to be a nonprofit, but whatever it might be, that's not really it. But I think we're sold that that's what we need. We need to be a Forbes 30 under 30. We need to raise capital to be seen as someone who is credible and to be taken seriously and all of that. And that's not necessarily it. And, I think it's really important when you get on that journey and you start working with, whether it's coaches or trainers or people who are helping you move on that journey, be very clear on what it is that you're really going after so that, you can make the right decisions. To your point, I love how honestly you spoke about like, hey, look, you don't love going to the gym every day. That's not like necessarily the thing, but you also do know that when you go, it helps you get what you really want. And so, and let's face it, starting any business, there are going to be activities that you don't want to do. Maybe the legal parts, maybe the accounting part, maybe the marketing and sales parts, whatever it might be. Plenty of things that would be equivalent.
All of the above.
The gym, the salads, and all of that. Like that's in business. That's the accounting, the marketing, the legal stuff. But we know. But if what you want is to make an impact on someone's life, or you want to help solve a problem in the world, then these things all of a sudden become way more doable. You can get down with these things. You're like, you know what? I can do this. And I'm not going to suffer because I know it's aligned with what I want. And that's why I wanted to talk very briefly about this, because when we talked about this, I saw that parallel right away. And I just love how you talk about it. And you're right. We could probably do a whole episode on this.
Yeah.
We will. We have good chemistry here. So I think you got to come back on the show and we got to talk about that. But again, I want to be mindful of the time because I've already taken more of your time than I had asked for. But real quick, one of the other things that drew me to you for this interview was how clear it became that it would just looking and following your social content, how it's so different. It's definitely aligned with who you are. It's not what everyone else is doing. And you kind of talked a little bit about this already. But I wanted you to talk a little bit about your values when it comes to social media content in this space. And I'll even give away the reason, because I think that there's people out there who have ideas for businesses that they want to bring to life, but maybe they think that, but that won't sell. And I think you've already felt this. You've gone through this and you made a decision to say, you know what, I'm going to do it my way. And that's why I love this story. Tell us a little bit more about this. And, you even shared some examples on our prep call. Yeah.
I think, it's interesting. I think an important part in a lot of this is to find people that you look up to they could be doing something similar to you or something completely different, but like have the same-ish upbringing. So someone I look up to a lot is, I think her name's Jamie Lima Curran. She's the founder of It Cosmetics, but she was in the beauty space.
Kern Lima, right? Jamie Kern Lima?
Yeah, something like that. Okay, yeah, I switched the, I love her because I resonate a lot with like, there was a certain way things were done in the beauty industry and certain things you don't show and you do show. The beautiful skin, kind of going back to what we talked about, glossy, no imperfections. And she was told no a million times, that she was like, I want to create this beauty company with like real faces and real imperfections and real rosacea, all this stuff. And she ended up making it work. And she's, talk about girl boss. It's an amazing story.
Get her book or just look her up and read the story.
Any podcast, any whatever. Her story is absolutely amazing. And I'm reading her book now and I love it because there's so many parallels with like self-worth and all that kind of stuff. But back to what you were saying, it's something I still struggle with. I'm not even gonna lie, because it's so fully ingrained in the fitness industry to use your body as your marketing, right? So be in the short shorts and the thing and have the abs and do the thing because like people are supposed to want to kind of look like you, and you're supposed to sell your product, which is the fitness plan, the meal prep program, and whatever. And I just remember me being younger and me having gone through my journey of, overtraining, getting so into like the health and fitness world that I gave myself a binge eating disorder. Like I was that girl looking at that content and wanting so badly to look like that person and buying the programs and buying the things and using fitness and eating for all the wrong reasons, and always being so like down on myself because I didn't look a certain way. And so when I started my business, I fell into the trap for a little bit of like, oh, okay, I have to, in order to sell my stuff, I have to look a certain way and approach. And I thankfully very quickly was like, no, I remember how I felt looking at that content, and I don't want to do that. Like, I want to be like the accounts that I eventually found that made me feel good about the body that I'm in and like approach things differently. And so I'm almost like my own avatar, right? Like when I'm thinking about like the content that I'm posting, I'm like, what would I have thought X amount of years ago when looking at this stuff, right? And it's a struggle constantly, right? Because I know I could be at point, A, if I did the things that everyone else is doing, right? But I'm getting there a little bit more slowly, but it feels better and it feels more aligned because I'm staying true to myself, and I know like this is the change that I want to see in the industry. And I think it really, like the people that need to see it, it really resonates with. And those are like the comments and the messages that I get that like keep me going. But it is scary. It's scary as like a personal trainer to be like, hey, I actually like don't want to work out for 2 hours a day. Like, all these things. And like, I have rolls on my stomach because I know what it takes to get a six pack, and I'm not interested in playing that game, right? Like you actually have to give up a lot to look a certain way. And aside from genetics and for it being your job to be a certain way, for you being able to, and then like the Photoshop and all, like it's just so kind of convoluted. And again, it was just like was never the approach that I wanted. So that was like kind of how I approached like showing up on social media. And it could be really scary because you do get the comments of like, oh, you're a personal trainer, you don't have a six pack. And you're like, yeah, because not everyone works out because they want to get a six pack, right? And even if like, I like that more celebrities are now talking about like, you have these male and female celebrities that are like, I had to do X for a role and I don't want to do that ever again. Like that sucked. You're like, yes, let's have more people talk about like what you actually have to do and give up, like to look a certain way, because it's so, the six pack program, this 6 weeks, this 12 weeks, this are just, it's tainting a really bad image in this space. And I really want to change that. And so that's why everyone has different bodies. Not everyone's going to be able to have a six pack. Not everyone's going to be able to fit into a 2 size jean, right? And nor should they have to, because for some people it would be actually really unhealthy too, because we all have different bodies and we're meant to have different bodies, right? And I think also just, if you're in the space and you're feeling this way, right? Like, just be careful what you like consume on social media, right? Like, I think there's the idea of like, you have to be skinny and X, Y, and Z to be happy. But like the longer I'm in this space, the more I'm realizing like, oh no, like some of those people that look that way that you think are really happy are so not. And I wasn't when I was at my thinnest. Like I was at my worst, mental health wise, physical health wise. And then you can follow people that are in larger bodies that also look super confident and super happy because they are. And they do work out and they do eat balance. That's just the body that they're in. And if you go to the doctor and you do a hormone panel and you do a blood panel, they are perfectly healthy, right? It's just again, a whole nother episode that I could go into. But yeah, that's why, because it didn't feel right to me and I knew how it made me feel, and I would never want anyone to feel that way looking at my stuff.
Yeah. And what I want people to take away from this is that this for you was such an important part of how you run your business, how you grow your business, and the impact that your business can make in this industry. And you said something that is so powerful and so important. It'll probably take longer this way. It's not going to be as quick as it would be if I just use the standard fear tactics or whatever were in the industry. But that's okay with you, because it's not a matter of speed. It's not a race. It's a matter of impact.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing in your stories, that what matters to you is the impact, not the speed at which you get to income or whatever. And also I'm hearing that you have a lot of faith that this will work, that this will, and you're seeing it already pay off. Obviously there was a moment where it hadn't yet paid off, but you had faith that it would. And now you're seeing the comments and people showing appreciation for what you're doing. And there's definitely a market out there. And then of course, someone like Jamie Kern-Lima, who obviously is just an incredible role model in this way, like for what you're trying to do. She obviously went through had to have a lot of faith that she would eventually get it, and she did. And again, her story is just absolutely amazing. That finish line of that story, like, I mean, when I heard her deliver that talk, honestly, I was crying, because it's just such a beautiful story, and you feel the pain that she must have felt going through that, but also that relief that she must have felt when it all came through. And it took longer. It didn't happen as quickly as it would have if she had just settled for the standard in the industry. But hey, she had her terms, and she wanted to make the impact she wanted to make, just like you want to make the impact. And I love this story, because for anyone listening, you might have an idea for a business that I'm sure you've run by somebody and they said, no, that's not how it works. No, you can't do that. It's got to be a different way. You should totally do it. Like, see what they're doing and just do that. And, that's the best way to start. And then maybe later one day you can kind of try to make the changes you want to make. And you know what? Honestly, I'm an advocate for no, hell no, don't do it that way. Do it the way you want to do it. And pursue that, because that is going to be the more fulfilling journey. That's the sustainable journey, because, when you talked about other parts of your journey that were less sustainable, when you felt like you were withering away and all of those things, goodness, it wasn't even a matter of, like, you weren't even working at your hardest. The job was pretty kind of like stagnant, and yet you're withering away.
Yeah.
So it's like, but now you're probably way busier than you were back then, building your own business, but it's way more sustainable, because it's
way more energizing.
It's you. It's who you are. You're just expressing yourself every day, and of course.
And there's purpose.
Yes. You're powered by purpose right now.
And it's like, I think the problem also is, like, you see social media and YouTube, and everyone looks like an overnight sensation, and some people are, but they're like such the few. Like, I like reading stories like Oprah Winfrey, like Jamie, like Starbucks, like any of these like, there are so many companies that if you read their stories, it's like there were so many more no's, and like just the amount that they had to go through to get there. And I think you can forget that when you see, especially in my generation, like just people becoming YouTube stars and blowing up on Instagram and all this stuff. And you're like, what? Like, there's a comedian recently, I think, that was talking about it. Like, they became really famous, like, and it seems like it's an overnight success. And they were like, I've been doing this for 15 years. The fact that I just eventually had one video pop off and now here I am headlining tours. But they were like, it's been 15 years of people making fun of me being bad at me. So I think we just need a little bit, like, those are the stories that you need to lean into a little bit more, because that's
the truth. Those are the stories of success. Those are the real stories of success. I love, like, when some people tell the overnight success story, they go, so yeah, like 20 years ago, I started doing this, then I started doing that, then I did this and I did that. And then I became an overnight success. 20 years later, I was an overnight success. It's awesome. And I'm like, yes, that's the way to.
Wow, your night's very long.
Overnight success takes 20 years or so, so like it's okay. Like, don't worry about it. But no, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think that is so important. Leaning into these stories, listening to them, reading them, learning about them, that this is what it really takes. But that's a fulfilling journey, because when you hear those people to share those stories, you also hear like a lot of really great positive vibes, you know?
Yeah.
You sense like the pride in that journey. You sense the fulfillment, the ups and the downs, all appreciated, you know, even though it was probably more downs than ups, but still full appreciation for that whole journey. Like,
and there's something to that, right? Because the overnight successes, like, I can bet that like the people that have the really fast overnight success, like, didn't build the trust and the fortitude, like the mental fortitude and all this stuff. So it's way easier to like all of a sudden get something and be like, oh my God, I'm not worth this. Or like, how did this happen? I don't know how to keep this up. How did I get here? Like all this stuff. When you've been working on it for so long and you finally get there, you have that, like, again, that trust muscle and that like, well, yeah, I got here because X, Y, and Z, and I was working hard and I was doing the thing. And, you know, so I think there's a lot of like self-worth in this, right? Like there's that, it kind of goes back to what you were saying in terms of like, what's your purpose? Why are you doing that? Ask yourself that question, because I think we hide behind, right? Like, you're doing this because you're trying to make yourself worth something, right? Like I struggle with that still, where it's like, well, if I'm not making X amount of money, then I'm not worth it. Like, no, you are worth it the way you are, right? You're just constantly trying to like improve upon yourself, build your skills, etc. But like, if you don't feel like you're worthy, then you're going to stay at that level all the time.
I love how you said that about, especially about the money part, you know, right? If you're not making this, or if you're not making more, then you're not, you know, you're not worth it, you're not worthy, or whatever it might be. And, you know, that's a big one. That's one of those, that's another six pack that we chase, right? That's another six pack that we're out there chasing. And it's like, no, it's that's not really it at the end of the day. And I think that, you know what, one thing I'm noticing now with some YouTubers is, you know, people who are quitting their YouTube businesses because it's no longer what they want. And when they speak openly about what they don't like about it anymore, it's just this never ending growth cycle that I'm like it only works if, or like it feels like they can only continue, they have to keep going up. They have to keep making more. And some of them are checking in and saying like, but am I happy with like a lower level of money?
Yeah.
I can do whatever I want and all of that. And I've been really appreciating a lot of these kinds of, you know, stories, because it's helping us understand. Yeah. Like when I think about success and my definition of success, honestly, a big part of the definition of success is, am I pursuing things that matter to me at any given moment? So if I was not, or if I was not pursuing enough of the things that matter to me, I would consider that, okay, I am not successful if I'm not doing that. This has become a big thing. Now, that said, to your point, it's still hard because we keep reading about this. We're inundated with all this like information and content around success and lots of money and all of this. And I just have to remind myself, like, no, wait a minute. I am like so effing happy. I may not be filthy rich, but I am very, very, I'm filthy happy.
It's the equivalent to the last 5 pounds in like fitness. Like, everyone is always trying to, it's always like, oh, those just last 5 pounds. I keep having to remind myself after that, like I tell my clients all the time, like, after that, it's going to be another 5 pounds, and it's going to be another 5 pounds. It's going to be, it's just never. And then once you get those 5 pounds, you're going to be like, well, then I want the 6-pack, and then I want the, it's just, there's no, like, if you don't have that feeling of self-worth, like, it's just always going to be like, okay, I'm here, now what? Okay, I'm here, now what? And you're just never allowed to just be happy.
Yeah. You know, the last thing I want to say about this is, because you alluded to this, or I think you were starting to allude to this, you know, in terms of like the speed, right? Like you could take the slow and steady approach, which, you know, when you've read a lot of stories about people who, it sounds like we hear the wrong version of the story. We hear the overnight version, but we don't, unless we look into it, we won't hear about the 20-year version of the story. But I just heard, or I saw a post on Instagram on Pitbull's account, and he said, you know, the success that comes quick can also go quick. And I probably say that exactly the way he said it. But essentially he was saying, you know, entrepreneurship is a long game, you know, you know, slow and steady is what you want. And he goes, but if it comes quickly, just know that it can go that quickly. And I love that distinction that he makes, because I mean, he's somebody that I really respect and admire because, man, he's been in that game for a long time. He was doing the small, like, he did the work that it took to get to the big time, to be able to do the NBA halftime shows, or like the NBA finals, like halftime show or whatever, or the All-Star game, or all those big moments. That didn't happen like overnight, right? He had, I remember in 2008, I think it was, or 9. So a while back, he was in St. Louis and he performed at some nightclub. And I'm just thinking like, oh my gosh, like that dude sells out entire arenas.
Yeah.
That's why I'm at a nightclub. Like, I mean, not a big nightclub, but it was just like a regular nightclub.
Yeah.
And he was there. Like, what just happened? Like, wow, like that's nuts. But, you realize, wow, well, he's been doing that work. He's been doing all those small gigs so that he can then get to the point where he could do the big ones. So he totally gets that. Awesome.
In fitness, we call it if you can't sustain your efforts, you can't retain your results. So it's the same thing. It's like people that generally, like people that go all in and, work out 6 times a week, 7 times a week, like then like do the crash dieting or whatever, you get to where you want to be, but you can't retain how you got there, and you slowly just start to go backwards because it's just not sustainable.
That is so applicable in so many everything basically. Not so many things, everything that fits. So I think that's a great moment. Like that's a great place to wrap this conversation up. But real quick before we do wrap up, tell us a little bit about the work you're doing right now. I know you've got a course, you've got some coaching. You mentioned even earlier that you're innovating, right? You're testing new ideas out, like group coaching and all that. Tell us a little bit about what you have going on right now and how someone might be able to like connect with you, and if they want to work with you, what would that take?
Yeah. So I have my Instagram that I'm on all the time, and I'm sure you'll probably link that. It's just my first and last name. And I have my website, Azul Cora Wellness. I have an email newsletter, all that stuff. So for all the freebies, go there. And then I do, most of my business is still one-on-one coaching. So I coach clients specifically. I work more so with females. So women that have a history of just like going on and off diets, going on and off workouts, have a kind of negative relationship with their bodies. I help them, what I call, heal the relationship with food, fitness, and their body so they can start working out sustainably for the long term, consistently. They can start eating a little bit more balanced, but without feeling like they're restricting or having to count calories or any of that stuff. And then a lot of it's kind of like self-healing work, right? Like healing that relationship, the way you see yourself, respecting your body a little bit more. So I do the one-on-one stuff, and then I do have a course. It's a 3-month program, and it's called Becoming Her, and it's basically all of my one-on-one coaching and my practices kind of tied into one little, not so little, I guess I should say, one course, one program, that if people don't want to do the one-on-one, they can do the course, and it's a little bit more self-paced, but it has everything you need, the journal prompts, the videos, the activities, all of it. And it covers nutrition, it covers mindset, and it covers fitness.
Awesome. Azul, thank you so much for everything. This was, I mean, I don't say this often, and you can listen to all my episodes and see that I don't, but I just, there was so much insight. Like, my gosh.
Yay.
Thing. And what I really appreciate is that you were willing to, when we connected, you had your topics that you usually talk about on podcasts, but I asked for something different and you were willing to give it a shot. And honestly, like I feel like, you sure you don't do this often? Like, because the stories just rolled right off your tongue, like just so smoothly. Everything was like silky smooth the way it came out. I was like, wow, that's insightful. So, which I know is going to be so helpful for those who are listening, especially those who are thinking about making that reinvention from corporate to first-time entrepreneurs. There's a lot of things that happen along that journey. You shared with us some of those things and what it takes to make that transition. So yeah, thank you so much for all of that. We appreciate it very much. All of your links will be in the show notes. So for those listening, you'll be able to find all the ways to contact Azul, to get in touch with her, to learn more about her classes, follow her on social media, all of that.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for having me and for pushing me outside of my comfort zone to talk about this. But I think it goes back to that purpose part, right? Like, if I think this will help people, then I'm an open book. I like to talk about anything and everything. So I really do hope it helps someone. And yeah, just always going back to your purpose. Remembering if you don't feel good, lean into that, get curious about it, right? And there's no sugarcoating. It's hard. Yeah. It's like sometimes I do think back and I'm like, dang, it would just really be nice to not have to pay this certain amount for health insurance or whatever, right? But at the end of the day, it still excites me. I still have that purpose. I still want the purpose and the values are still there. And yeah, like I said, it's not necessarily easy or easier, but if you really feel like it's aligned with you and it's something that you want to try, like, what's the worst that can happen? You just go back to the other job that you had and try something else, right? Like, yeah. I think that's the biggest thing.
Exactly. And you're right. That would be the worst that could happen, meaning that every attempt, even the failed ones, would still be better than that.
Exactly.
That's the beauty of pursuing something that fulfills you and that connects with you, is that even in failure, you have to admit, that was pretty cool though. Those couple of years that I was trying to do that, like, I did have fun. It didn't work out, but I have to at least admit I had fun, so bummer that it didn't work out, but it was a good
still cool that you tried, like, still amazing that you tried. That's so awesome.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, thank you again. Thank you for listening to this episode of the School of Reinvention podcast. Again, I'm your host, Roger Osorio. If you're ready to start your journey to reinvention and want to walk the path with others, visit www.rogerosorio.com and go to the School of Reinvention to check out for yourself how a community-based coaching platform can help you begin your next reinvention. You can also go to rogerosorio.com to purchase my new book, The Journey to Reinvention, and receive some exciting bonuses. Until next time, make your day great.